Last summer, I decided to take a solo trip to my family's house in the woods. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend. Just me, my books, and nature. No distractions, no stress, just peaceful solitude. The house was a few hours' drive from the city, nestled deep in a dense forest where the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of a bird. When I arrived, the place was just as I remembered it, quaint, rustic, and slightly eerie in its isolation. The wooden porch creaked under my feet as I stepped up to unlock the door. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine and aged wood, a comforting reminder of childhood summers spent here. I set down my bags, opened the windows to let in the fresh air, and took a deep breath. This was exactly what I needed. The first day was perfect. I hiked along the familiar trails, breathing in the crisp mountain air. The leaves whispered in the wind, and the sun cast long golden shadows through the trees. I spotted a deer grazing just outside the house's window that evening, its dark eyes watching me curiously before it bounded away into the dusk. As night fell, I curled up with a book, the soft glow of my lantern casting flickering shadows on the walls. But that night, things got weird. I heard it first around 11 p.m. A faint crunching sound, like someone walking on dry leaves. I told myself it was probably an animal, maybe a raccoon or a fox rummaging through the underbrush. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that it was normal. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the sound didn't go away. Instead, it grew louder, more deliberate. I got up and walked to the window, pressing my face against the cool glass. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long, skeletal shadows. But I didn't see anything. Just darkness. Just trees. I shrugged it off and went back to bed. At around 2 a.m., I woke up to a different sound. Knocking. Not on the door, on the window, right next to my bed. I bolted upright, my heart hammering in my chest. The knocking was soft but deliberate. 3 times. Slow and measured. I swallowed hard, my breath caught in my throat. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, a loose branch tapping against the glass. But deep down, I knew branches don't knock 3 times. I lay there, frozen, listening to the silence that followed. My mind raced. If someone was outside, why weren't they saying anything? Why weren't they trying to break in? After what felt like an eternity, I slowly reached for the flashlight on my nightstand and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness as I pointed it at the window. Nothing. Just my own terrified reflection staring back at me. I barely slept that night. Every rustling leaf, every shifting shadow felt ominous. By morning, I was exhausted but determined to brush off the night's events. I told myself I was being paranoid. But then, something else happened. I was sitting on the porch later that day, sipping coffee and trying to enjoy the tranquility when I saw him. A man. He was standing among the trees, too far away to make out any details, but close enough that I could tell he was watching me. His posture was rigid, his head slightly tilted as if studying me. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't move. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe he was a lost hiker? A hunter? But something about the way he stood there, silent and motionless, set every nerve in my body on edge. I blinked, and just like that, he was gone, vanished into the trees. Shaken, I went inside, locking the door behind me. My hands trembled as I set my coffee down. I needed to calm down, to rationalize. Maybe I had imagined him. Maybe the lack of sleep was making me paranoid. Then I saw it. A note on the counter. I hadn't put it there. And I was the only one in the house. The paper was yellowed, the edges slightly curled as if it had been left out in the damp air for too long. There were only 4 words scrawled in smudged black ink. I see you too. My stomach dropped. My hands turned ice cold. Someone had been inside the house. While I was outside. While I was sleeping. While I was awake. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. No service. Of course. The house was too far from town, too deep in the woods. I tried to breathe, tried to think. I couldn't stay here. I needed to leave. But as I reached for my keys, I realized with horror that they were gone. Panic surged through me. Someone had taken them. Someone didn't want me to leave. That night, I barricaded the doors and windows, stacking furniture against them. I held a kitchen knife in my trembling hands, my ears straining for any sound. And then, at midnight, the banging started again. This time, it was on the door. Loud. Insistent. I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. I could see his shadow through the window. The man from the woods. He was just standing there, staring at the door. I didn't know what to do. I was alone, miles from anyone. My breath came in ragged gasps as I backed away, my mind racing. Then I heard the doorknob rattle. That was it. I couldn't stay there. I didn't care that it was the middle of the night. I grabbed my flashlight, flung open the back door, and ran. Into the woods. Away from the house. Away from him. The branches tore at my skin as I stumbled through the darkness. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. Behind me, I could hear heavy footsteps, deliberate and unhurried. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing onto the dirt road that led to the house. My vision blurred with exhaustion and fear, but then I saw headlights. A car. I jumped up, waving my arms frantically. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, stopped and rolled down the window. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. I gasped out what had happened, barely able to form coherent words. He didn't hesitate. He unlocked the door, and I scrambled inside, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. We drove straight to the nearest town, where I finally called the police. They went back to the house, searching every inch of the property and the surrounding woods. But they didn't find anyone. To this day, I don't know who he was. But I do know one thing. I wasn't alone out there.